There is a word, just one word, and it is so small, so ordinary that most people never stop to question it. Fine. Someone asks how you're doing, you smile, maybe even before they finish the sentence, and out it comes. Smooth, practiced, automatic. I'm fine. But here's what no one talks about. The people who say it most convincingly are often the ones who mean it the least. This is not a story about lying. It is not a story about weakness. It is a story about a particular kind of person, the ones who became so skilled at carrying themselves quietly that the world simply stopped asking what they were carrying. And today, we are going to look inside that silence. You probably know someone like this. Maybe you are someone like this. They are the stable one, the reliable one, the person everyone calls when things fall apart because somehow they always know what to say. They show up. They hold space. They listen with a kind of patience that feels almost impossible. And when the conversation ends and everyone else has been taken care of, someone might turn to them and ask, almost as an afterthought, "But how are you doing?" And they smile, and they say it, fine. Not because nothing is happening inside them, but because something much deeper than a mood has been activated, a pattern, a protection, a role they were handed so long ago that it no longer feels like a role at all. It just feels like who they are. The always fine person is not emotionally empty. In fact, they're often the most emotionally full people in the room. They feel deeply. They notice everything. They carry more than most people would ever guess. They have simply learned, somewhere along the way, that their feelings were not the ones that mattered in the room. Picture this. It is a Tuesday evening. Nothing dramatic has happened. No crisis, no catastrophe, just the slow accumulation of a difficult few weeks. A quiet unraveling that has been building for some time. A friend calls. They talk for an hour about the friend's relationship, their work stress, their uncertainty about the future, and this person listens. Really listens, asks the right questions, offers the kind of calm, grounded perspective that makes their friend feel genuinely better by the time they hang up. And then, at the very end, almost as the call is wrapping up, the friend says, "Anyway, sorry for dumping all of this on you. How are you doing?" There is a pause, just a half second, and in that half second, something real almost surfaces, something true, something that has been waiting. And then the mechanism engages. "Oh, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. I'm glad you called." The friend hangs up, feeling lighter, and this person sits alone in a quiet room, holding everything they almost said. That moment, that half second, is what this entire documentary is about. This pattern does not appear from nowhere. It is built slowly, carefully, often in childhood, in environments where emotional expression had consequences, not always dramatic consequences, sometimes just the quiet, consistent experience of feelings going unmet. Maybe they grew up in a home where one parent was struggling with illness, with instability, with their own unprocessed grief, and this child learned early that the emotional temperature of the house depended on their ability to stay calm, to not add to the weight, to be easy. Maybe they were the child who was praised for being mature, for not crying, for handling things. And every time they received that praise, something in their nervous system registered, "This is how I earn love, by not needing anything." Maybe there was no single event, just the gradual, accumulated understanding that their distress made others uncomfortable, that vulnerability created distance rather than closeness, that the safest version of themselves was the composed one. Psychologists call one version of this parentification, when a child assumes the emotional caretaking responsibilities of an adult at the cost of their own emotional development. But it does not always look that dramatic. Sometimes it is just a household where feelings were quietly discouraged, where stoicism was modeled as the only dignified response to difficulty. And the child adapted, because children always adapt. The behavior that protected them then is the same behavior that contains them now. Research on emotional suppression is consistent and in many ways sobering. Studies examining chronic affect suppression, the long-term habitual practice of concealing emotional experience, have found measurable physiological consequences. Elevated cortisol, disrupted sleep, increased cardiovascular strain over time. The body, it turns out, keeps an honest record, even when the person does not. What is particularly striking is where this profile tends to be absent: therapy offices. The always fine person rarely presents for support, not because they do not need it, but because their outward behavior does not signal distress. They are articulate, they are composed. They often spend the first several sessions of therapy talking about other people's problems before a skilled clinician realizes this person has never been the subject of their own concern. Attachment researchers have also documented a pattern they call compulsive self-reliance, a style that develops when early bids for emotional support were consistently unmet or discouraged. These individuals do not merely prefer independence, they have internalized, at a deep level, the belief that depending on others is either unsafe or simply not available to them. They are not avoidant by nature, they were taught to. Here is where it gets complicated. The always fine person is often the most emotionally intelligent person in the room. They can read people with remarkable accuracy. They offer comfort that lands. They hold space for others' emotional chaos with genuine patience and warmth. And yet, they cannot do this for themselves. They have developed emotional fluency as an outward practice while remaining, in many ways, unreachable to their own interior experience. Psychologists sometimes use the term emotional masking to describe the active, effortful process of presenting a regulated exterior while experiencing something very different internally. It is not deception in the way we typically use that word. It is closer to a habit so deeply practiced that it has become involuntary. There is a second paradox worth sitting with. The very thing that makes them beloved is what makes them invisible. People stop checking in on those who never seem to need it. The always fine person becomes, over time, the emotional infrastructure of their relationships, always there, always steady, rarely seen. And because they never appear to struggle, no one thinks to ask twice. The person described most often as so strong is frequently the one who has simply never been given a safe place to be anything less. This pattern does not exist in a vacuum. Culture shapes it, rewards it, and in many cases celebrates it. In societies where stoicism carries historical weight, working-class communities, culture shaped by collective survival, environments where emotional restraint was necessary for dignity or safety, the always fine identity is not just a personal coping style. It is a cultural inheritance. It is what strength looks like in those spaces. Gender adds another layer. Men are often conditioned to treat emotional expression as incompatible with masculinity. The message, delivered in 100 different ways from a very young age, handle it yourself. Women face a different but equally constraining pressure to remain emotionally available for others while suppressing their own anger, grief, or need, lest they be seen as difficult. And then there is the modern performance of wellness. Social media has created an entirely new architecture for the always fine persona, the composed caption, the measured response, the absence that reads as stability. In a culture that has begun to aestheticize vulnerability, where sharing emotional struggles has become, in some circles, a form of social currency, the always fine person watches from a careful distance, unable to participate, unsure if the space being offered is real or just another performance of a different kind. The world keeps telling them it is safe to open up, but the body remembers a different lesson. Let's be honest about the strengths first, because they are real. The always fine person is steady in crisis. They are trustworthy, deeply empathic, often gifted with a kind of quiet leadership that others gravitate toward without quite knowing why. They are the person you want in the room when things go wrong, but the costs accumulate. Unprocessed emotion does not disappear, it relocates. It shows up as chronic tension, as a vague, persistent exhaustion that sleep does not seem to touch, as somatic symptoms that appear without obvious cause. It shows up as a slow erosion of intimacy, because authentic connection requires being seen, and the always fine person has made themselves structurally unseeable. There's also a cost to identity. Over time, the mask and the face begin to blur. The person who started out suppressing their emotions to survive eventually loses reliable access to those emotions altogether, not through numbness, but through long practice. They find themselves sitting with something painful and genuinely not knowing how to name it, how to hold it, or who to tell. They have been fine for so long that they have almost forgotten what anything else feels like. Imagine a house. Every light is on. From the street, it looks warm, inhabited, full of life. People pass by and think someone good lives there. But inside, the rooms are very quiet. And somewhere toward the back of the house, past the organized shelves and the clean surfaces and the carefully maintained everything, there is a door. It has been closed for a long time, long enough that the person living there has almost stopped noticing it, almost stopped wondering what's behind it. Fine has kept that door shut, not out of cowardice, out of practice, out of a history that taught them very early that what was behind that door was not something others could handle. But here is what no one told them. Opening that door is not collapse. It is not weakness. It is not burden. It is not the thing they were always afraid it would be. It is arrival. It is the moment the house finally becomes a home, not because it looks different from the outside, but because someone is finally living in all of it. If this found you today, if some part of this felt less like a documentary and more like a mirror, you don't have to do anything with that right now. Just notice it. And if you feel moved to, leave something in the comments, not a performance, just whatever is true. Because sometimes the first step toward not being fine is simply admitting it to yourself. Even just once. Even just here.